We'd like to thank Mainspring Companies for sponsoring Season 1 of The Next Entrepreneur. Mainspring celebrates the entrepreneurial journey, and we are very grateful for their support.
The two of us started it. We had cash in the cash register, which was maybe not even $100, and a couple pieces of meat in the freezer. And he had Dr. Brown's cream soda and stuff like that in the freezer with, this nice cheese and stuff. And I remember going, the first thing we need to do is get rid of that junk and put some Budweiser in here, and so we did that. And we would cut one piece of meat for a sandwich, and we would run out of meat, and we'd have to go down and buy a piece of meat at the grocery store down there, and then we had to learn how to cook it, and it was just a mess.
Hello, my name is Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm here today with our producer, Mr. Daniel Sagona, and our guest today is Mr. Brian Brousseau. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure.
I've been really excited. I was out on a hike like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and for some reason I just thought of you. I'd seen something, maybe your name came up, and I started thinking about what I knew about your journey because I worked for you 40 years ago or 42 years ago, and I was like, God, that guy has got a fantastic story.
Don't say that. Yeah, don't say the numbers.
Right. So I started thinking back, how I watched your journey the whole time, and I was like, I got to get him on the podcast, and you accepted graciously, and I'm glad you're here. So how have you been doing?
Good, doing good.
It looks like you're working hard.
Oh, like I tell people all the time, I'm living the dream.
Yeah. Well, my memory of you from way back in the day is you were just a hard-working, scrappy entrepreneur, and I think once you're that, you're always that, right?
Obviously.
Apparently. So today you're in the real estate investment business, right?
Apartment, yeah. I'm in the residential real estate business.
So you lease out apartments. Mm-hmm. And that's an ever-growing empire there, right? You just keep building and
leveraging and building, and I've always had a interest in real estate from a young age.
Yeah, and you're taking properties, you're putting elbow grease into them.
Yeah,
you're working them, you're improving them.
Mm-hmm. I basically buy mismanaged, mishandled apartment buildings and totally bring them back to what they look like when they were built.
To maximize their value, right?
Well, yeah. You can get a good price if the apartments or buildings in dire straits. And then, to me, it's kind of like, I'm going to fix them up anyway. Why not go ahead and buy them at a cheaper price, torn up?
Right.
Because I'm going to redo them anyway. So I'm going to spend the same amount of money remodeling them, whether they're decent or not.
But there's some property owners that just aren't willing to put that elbow grease into them at that point for whatever reason.
That's a really big problem.
Yeah.
Because you can, I can fix up a apartment building, and it doesn't cause me a whole lot of problem. It does affect the value of it, because if you've got a slumlord next to you or across the street that's not doing what needs to be done, and you upgrade your property, the value doesn't go up as much if your neighbors are doing the same thing.
Yeah, good
so
point.
I kind of, my answer to that problem is buy them all.
That's right.
And so I usually describe myself as I'm actively involved in making myself miserable. And so,
It's not an easy business.
My wife, well, neither is a restaurant business.
Right.
My wife just is, has problems with my a little is good, more is better concept because I keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and it sometimes gets overwhelming.
Yeah,
When you get to the point where I'm at now, it's getting pretty.
So you talk about the restaurant business. You started with your family, your brothers, in the restaurant business, the catering, delicatessen and bar and
Saloon. That's
saloon
what we call it.
in Baton Rouge here on Perkins at
Acadian.
And that's where I worked for you briefly. But you had mentioned that, that was kind of a family affair. Tell us about your family growing up.
Oh, my goodness. Well, with 12 kids, honestly, I describe it as heaven. Being the, ninth of 12 kids, and my father made our home like a playground for kids. It was just a wonderful place to grow up. We had our own full baseball backstop with spotlights and swimming pool and trampoline and basketball court and shuffleboard and pool table and when I grew up, it was at that time when my mother would lock us out in the morning.
Yeah.
You got to be back before dark. They had an oven outside.
Oh, don't come back before dark.
Right, please. And they had an oven outside and a refrigerator and a water fountain. And, we had a covered patio off the back of the house that was as big as the house. And it was just a, absolutely wonderful childhood.
And your father, Doc Brousseau, was a medical doctor.
He's an orthodontist.
Was
the only one in the area for years and years and years.
So what was the mix of boys and girls?
Half and half, 6 and 6.
No kid. Mm-hmm. And so how did the catering get started?
So my father had some financial difficulties at some point in time, and his office was across the street from Alford's over there in Government. And he sold that, and he moved over to where the catery was, Claytor's. Claytor and him knew one another, and he took I think it's a 40 by 80 shell, and that's where his office was for years. I was in high school at the time, and he also, I need to tell you, he put me and my next older brother, Terry, in the paper route business when I was in 7th grade and Terry was in 8th grade. And Terry had his driver's license, and so he helped us get started, and we had one little paper route, and then we grew that to having 1,500 papers a day. And Dennis and Kevin, you knew them.
Right.
They were, younger, and they started out. It was something, my parents kind of insisted that we help each other and look over each other and take care of each other. So they would help us, but we did this. I did that paper route. Each one of them dropped off, but I did it until I was in junior in high school.
Really?
It took 4 of us starting out, and I was doing it by myself. You would drive and fold and throw, and, it was a hand coordination.
You had it down.
Drive with your knees, and, But anyway, anyway, that was kind of I think that had a lot to do with my father's opinion of me and Terry. He kind of took me and him hunting and fishing a lot. It seems as the older brothers were a little bit older and probably, I don't know if he did it with them or not, but he always kind of took the two of us, and neither one of us were the best of students in school, but I think he saw an ability to, run a business or do that type of thing in both of us. And
Daniel, that's a common theme here. Not our entrepreneur guest school not necessarily being the strongest suit.
Well,
which is really interesting.
Well, when really it became a problem was when puberty kicked in. That's when it really went south. And so, but anyway, he moved into that shell on the catery, and that's where he opened his first office. And I got tired of the paper route thing and wanted to do something different. I never worked for anyone. I've always worked for myself, and I'm very comfortable with that, by the way. The guy, at some point in time, other orthodontists were starting in Baton Rouge, and my father was getting older, and his practice was falling off. And I think he also was showing signs of leukemia. And so one of his most important things in life was his membership at the Baton Rouge Country Club. He was an avid gin rummy player, card player, and he loved that membership, and he wasn't going to lose it for anything. But we moved away from that house, and he got that office there. And around 11th grade, I got tired of the paper route, and I went and started. This guy, a friend of his at the country club named Bob Bleeden, was worked for the police chief at the time, and he didn't get reelected. And this Bob Bleeden guy obviously had some bucks, but he wanted to open up a Jewish deli. And he picked that location and went to my father, and my father gave him the front half of his office and made an entrance to the back of his office. And I was the guy's first employee. And I would have to walk through my father's office and see him, all of them, quite a few times during the day to get to the back where you would dump the trash or whatever. Right. And I'd tell my father that he didn't know what the hell he was doing. And that
the guy you were working for?
Yeah, and that we ought to buy it, and we could do great with it. And I don't know if that planted the seed or not, but later on I was asked to leave high school. We won't get into the details of that. But I had I had seen the movie Easy Rider when I was about 9th or 10th grade, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. Just, go traveling around the country, the United States of America. It just sounded like a great idea. Yeah. And so me and a friend of mine, his father worked for Ethel. I don't know if you remember this guy, Edward Goodell, but he and I don't recognize that. His father had gotten a transfer with Ethel and moved to, I can't think of the country, but he was there in the senior year, and I was at Lehigh in my senior year, and we made this plan. We were writing back and forth to each other to, when we finished high school, we were going to take off traveling. And I actually bought one of Claytor's old vans from him and was getting it ready for the trip. And saving up money. And when he came back, we came to the conclusion that we weren't going to get there. I think we had $800 between the two of us in the van. Right. And we came to the conclusion that we weren't going to get very far on $800. I think gas was about $1.50 at the time. I don't remember. But we did come to that conclusion, and the solution to that problem was to get paid to do what you want to do. And by the way, I might say this is a Brousseau. It runs across my family, all brothers and sisters. If you can figure out how to get paid to do something you like to do, you've made it. You got to like something first and then figure out. But anyway, we went down to South Downs, right, yep, and discussed it with some of the other brain surgeons in the parking lot. And the guy that owns Welsh Cleaners, one of his sons, Jimmy, comes out and says he knows a guy that owns a carnival, and we could go work for him, and he would pay us to travel. I said, that sounds great, perfect. And he called the guy, and the guy said he would hire us, and we jumped in the van, and my father had a letter on my suitcase, and we took off. We were gone. Didn't have a high school diploma. and was leaving town to go travel with the carnival. I don't think he was happy, but the letter basically said he didn't think this was a good idea, you know. And I would call home every couple of months or a month and tell my mother I was okay. And one time after about 4 or 5 months had gone by, because we were successful at it, we were having a great time. And you go from city to city.
So you stopped for like a week somewhere?
Yeah, but we were doing the state fairs, and we were going from state to state.
Right.
And, you know, you'd stay there for a week and a half and pack up and move to go to another state fair. And but I called home, and my younger sister answered the phone. She says, "Brian, Daddy talks about you all the time." She says, "You were the only smart one. You got the hell out of here." So, but anyway, this is going to take longer. Anyway, he gets the guy opens a catery, and I'm telling him that, and I plan to see.
That was the name that he had for the business.
He picked the Catering Deli, and so I took off traveling with the carnival, and Terry started working there. But I think the seed had been planted that, you know, and
you guys had set ownership on.
Well, you know, our futures weren't looking too bright at the time. So, and you know, my father, he did love us and want us to do well, and you know, I think because of the financial problems, I think he may have felt a little guilt about us not going to college. I mean, the concept of everyone is that you go to college and you'll be successful.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm the absolute. I disprove that in every way.
Absolutely.
And so anyway, but he gets it, and Terry's working there, and I think Terry went off to do something else. And at some point in time, I came back, and I went back to get my GED. It wasn't successful. Somebody offered me a job. Now I did know all about the dental industry from growing up. It was the one thing I got an A in at the science fair each year. From first grade up, as I would get all of my father's models and stuff from his office, and I impressed everybody, and I got an A on that. That was the only thing I got an A on. And but anyway, I was knowledgeable about that. And my brother, I have a brother. One brother was a dental technician. Another sister was a dental hygienist, and so anyway, this dental lab that my brother worked for offered me a job being their rep, and I would travel around the state.
So how old were you when you got back to,
you know,
like
20?
To start the catering?
Around 20, 21, 22.
So Terry's a year older.
Terry's 2 years older than me.
Okay, so y'all started it together?
Well, the two of us started it. We had the cash in the cash register, which was maybe not even $100, and a couple pieces of meat in the freezer. And he had Dr. Brown's cream soda and stuff like that in the freezer with this nice cheese and stuff. And I remember going, the first thing we need to do is get rid of that junk and put some Budweiser in here, you know. And so we did that, and we would cut one piece of meat for a sandwich, and we would run out of meat, and we'd have to go down and buy a piece of meat at the grocery store down there, and then we had to learn how to cook it, and it was just a mess. And I, one of my favorite stories is at some point in time, I was all about being creative and expanding the menu, and I remember a friend of mine and I were riding around right after we bought it, and I was looking for things to make it more popular. First of all, being one of 12, family of 12, and being known for all of us were pretty, outspoken, and so we knew a lot of people, and the span is like a 20-year span of people that went to schools in Baton Rouge.
Right.
I mean, you know, Dennis and Kevin were still in 9th and 10th grade when we got it. And so we had people, my oldest sister was 30 years old, so we had people who went to St. Joseph's, Catholic High, you name, you know.
Right.
And so that was a immediate, you know, the word was out and people were coming by to check it out. But I wanted to.
But it's still just the front part of that suite.
Well, we expanded it.
Yeah.
We expanded it like 3 to 5 times and kept taking on more and more space.
So first you went back, maybe when your father moved out?
Well, when my father finally retired, we took that on, and then we brought my brother Mac in. Mac was in California, and he was going through a divorce. So we brought him in to help us, and he's the one that built the bar. The atmosphere and everything was all his doing. Yeah. And so, and then we started.
Which that was classic. I mean, that's an iconic.
He did a great job, no doubt about it. And so, but I want to tell you this story about the salad. I wanted to sell a salad. I never ate salads. Didn't know anything about salads. Well, me and a friend of mine were riding around, you know, partying, and I said, "How do you make a salad?" He said, "Well, you already have everything." I said, "Well, come on, listen." We went over there and unlocked the door, and he showed me we had lettuce that we were putting on the sandwiches, and we had cheese that we sliced it up and put them on around a paper bowl, and put a little. We had deviled eggs. We kept those from the prior on. We kept making those. Those were popular, and we cut an egg up and put a little egg on it. There's your salad. And tomatoes. We already had those for sandwiches. And so the next day I made 5, and we put on the chalkboard, "Try Brian salad, 50 cents." And I think I had to eat one, and one of my other brothers and sisters had to eat one, and we sold like 2. And then the next day we sold 10. And then next day, and plus women eat salads.
Right.
And so the women from the area were finding out about it. Of course, I'm going out putting flyers out. I'm doing every sales technique you can think of to promote. And people were, you know, excited about it. It was happening. You could tell there was an energy there from immediately. Yeah. And, I mean, you know, 2 weeks later, I was getting there before daylight and putting cups out on all the tables and in the kitchen, and walking around with a bag of lettuce, and selling 100 at 50 cents a piece. And then we had to get dressings and have them ready. And so, you know, but that was the way everything.
But look, the sandwiches were just amazing. So I worked there. I made sandwiches there for you.
Yeah.
And they were exceptional.
I know.
They were exceptional. And I saw you do a post on social media a few months ago, and like bringing back what were your favorite sandwiches kind of thing. Or somebody started
Yeah.
And I remember people were putting out, but the club sandwich was just spectacular.
My wife likes that one the best too. But
hey, let me take a break here, Brian, getting a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. We would like to thank Mbd Automation for their support of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. Mbd Automation is a mechanical install contractor with a program-centric focus. So what do these guys do? They install conveyor systems, VRCs, platforms, singulators, sorters, and all sorts of other types of automated equipment. Who do they work for? They work for systems integrators, manufacturers, and end users in fulfillment centers, airports, mail processing facilities, and projects in the defense industry. Mbd Automation works for numerous Fortune 500 companies across the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. If Mbd Automation can help you on your next project, you can find them online at mbdautomation.com. And we are back with Mr. Brian Brousseau. So, Brian, you've got the catering open now, and but y'all are drawing in more and more people, and you actually expanded yet again, right?
Yes, yes.
And is that when you got a music? Is when you put in a stage and stuff in it?
There was I believe the name of the place was Paul's Art Studio or something. It was right next door to us.
You took over that space.
Took over that space. Kept people coming in the same front door, and added seating for the restaurant, and just the lunch business was phenomenal. I mean, just every day packed. And then the dinner business was also, I lined the back wall. We must have had 30 or 40 video games. So families could come and shovel the quarters to their kids and sit there and have a beer, a drink, or eat a sandwich, and their kids were safe running around playing the video games. And then, it was just a little bit of something for everyone.
But it seemed to me like, when I think back on those days, that y'all were constantly constantly adjusting and, renovating and adding. And, then there was, you built a second floor overlooking the stage, right? That was kind of a separate little thing.
Right. It was a matter of, it was kind of like one day I looked up there and I saw light through a crack in the wall up there and said, "What is that?" I went and walked around and went upstairs, and I said, I visualized it immediately. I said, we can.
I remember early on, y'all were utilizing every inch of that space, and your storage for your dry goods, your beer, your liquor was in the rafters. I mean, you would pull down a ladder.
Right.
And you pull down this ladder, and everything had to be carried up there because there was just no other place to store it.
Right.
And in fact, you had an office, quote unquote, a little office in the rafters on the front of the building. Again, you had to pull down the ladder, and you go up there, and a couple of people would be working in the attic. It was unbelievable, man. So, I mean, with, you were ducking in that space, but that's where y'all had your calculator, adding up all your receipts and stuff. It was crazy. So, but your music scene started to explode at some point. We
also started opening on Sunday, which is something when we did that, 95 or 99% of the restaurants, it was common that they were closed on Sunday and Monday. Right. And we had 4 brothers trying to make a living off of this place, and we started opening on Sunday and Monday, and
And your music scene started just popping up, somewhere in there. And
it was a struggle. It was after Terry left and went and opened Brousseau's, and I started hiring bands, and I started getting a feel for the price they charge. And, I looked at my night's receipts, and Monday night was the worst night of the week. I'd be in there at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd have me and a bartender, and I'd let something else we did is we never went home early because business was slow. We let all the employees go home, and we stayed and worked, always. Right. But Monday night, 10 o'clock, 2 people sitting at the bar, a bartender, me. I'd clean the restaurant up, and I'd say, we got to get something going here. And I went out and started investigating bands and found some professional musicians, but they weren't doing anything on Monday nights either. Right. And they were willing to negotiate. So I made a deal with them that if they were so good, that they thought they were great, that they could pull a crowd, and I would pay them off of my increased sales for that. I could show them what my sales were running, right. and so that was how it started. And we hired the Rude Boys, and the Rude Boys started playing at the Catering on Monday night. And we noticed that right around midnight it would thin out. Right, and so I told him we're going to have a limbo contest at midnight, and he would say, first place winner is a Maserati, and second place is a free condo. And then third place was $25, right? But, any trick in the book to keep people coming. And what would happen is we would have a good crowd on Monday night. Yeah. And also I didn't charge a cover. And that became very popular aspect to having live music, because people love live music. And then when you didn't have to pay a cover, couldn't be beat. Right, and so I insisted on not charging a cover just for that reason, because it really put us on the map. Most live music bands had to play at the Catering to break into the market. So they would play there, and I started getting some really good bands.
Man, you had just an iconic venue there.
Oh, my goodness.
It was just
it exploded.
Yeah, it was a great place to be.
We used to answer the phone, Catering, live music, no cover, and a pickle on every sandwich.
Love that. Okay, so Terry's left to start Brousseau Seafood Restaurant. I worked over there with him doing that as well. And but you stayed with, and then Dennis and Kevin are in with you now, or had been in there.
And my mother, she was an equal stockholder. My father had passed away at that point.
I see. So, but you start to continue to want to expand, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you tell us like how you had kind of looked at other properties and tried other locations and things like that.
That kind of leads into what I'm doing now. Through that constant trying to expand, paying landlords, pumped up rent amounts, that was a big debt or big expense to fit into your budget. And so I started, fantasizing and looking into and learning more about money and how money works and how to, cut corners and how to, I took a seminar that really changed things for me. One of my favorite terms is OPM. You know what that is? Other people's money. Okay. And that fascinated me. So, learned a lot about cutting corners and mutual funds and investing and one of the major things that led me to was real estate as one of the strongest things to invest in. I mean, banks love nothing more than real estate for collateral. And so, it took years for that to gel for me, but that started me on it and opening different locations and, looking at your overhead, trying to make the budget work. Right. And that rent was a killer. Yeah.
So you tried a number of different locations, but that Perkins Road location, the Catering, the original Catering, that was your cash cow, right?
No doubt about it. Yeah. No doubt about it. There's a lot of things about it that are reproducible, but not the family thing. That busted the doors open to the public for us.
You mean having that 20 years of Brousseau notoriety and
family and of all ages, and I mean everybody of all age came there to check it out.
Yeah, that's cool.
All you need to do is get it started. But Blimpie and all of these type of sandwich places, I envision being able to do that with the Catering, and none of these places have the kind of quality that we were putting out, and it's not that much more difficult than what they're doing. Yeah. It's a simple procedure that they're not doing. Yeah. I don't understand why they don't.
So look, Brian, how did y'all exit the Catering? You sold the business at some point.
Well, for me, it was had a lot to do with alcoholism. I quit drinking, and when I quit drinking, everything changed. It's not just me changing, but the people that are my family members and people around me. Well, the best way I can say it is a lot of people didn't like me sober. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a bad way for me. They didn't like me sober. They liked me better when I was drinking for selfish reasons.
Right, got it.
And so when I the first guy that I got involved with that started showing me how this whole alcoholism thing worked, I was spitting out all these blame things about everybody around me blaming. He said, wait a minute. He said, let's fix what's wrong with you, and then we'll fix everybody else, okay? And that just shut me up.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, okay.
So
and it's been 27 years, and I'm still trying to do what he said.
Yeah, good for you. Congratulations. But you were also at the catery for about that long of a time, weren't you?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that happened. You stopped drinking, and then that led to your exit of the catery?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
Without getting into the gory details, yes.
Okay. And then, but your next restaurant.
That's when I went down and opened up O'Brien's Ice House.
Yeah, which really, to me, was a fascinating, development, because you had this lot there that we all drove by forever.
I know, me too.
And I wouldn't have thought anyone would have put anything there. But you figured out that not only was it viable, but you had all the parking potential underneath the overpass.
Well, in that same building that Ronnie was at, right next door to it was a 4x8 sign that was covered over with weeds, said for sale.
Yeah.
And I'd ridden by it every day, 10 times a day, all my life,
yep.
and never saw that sign. But when I had taken the seminar and started getting interested in real estate, I started looking at things like that. And I was looking in the neighborhood, that lot over there where over there across from Catholic St. Aloysius on Perkins Road, where the gas station is, and all those lots. I mean, those lots were selling for $800,000 the lot.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get a feel for the cost of it.
Right.
And I found out who owned that, which was the people in the printing business. Can't think of their names. I'm bad with names. I always say that last Budweiser causes me not to be able to remember names. But anyway, they were friends of my family, and it had been sitting there. That lot. Ortlib,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they had been sitting there vacant forever. But what I found out about it is it was 30 feet wide at the front, but it ballooned out, and the interstate where you get wraps around it, and it just did this. And I went, And
so what'd you pick that up for?
$125.
Oh, that's crazy.
And then
you moved some
old
houses.
I bought the lots next to it,
okay.
And I bought that building that Ronnie was working out of.
Yeah, that little Ronnie Rodriguez you're talking about. Was it a mill workshop?
Yeah.
You had there? Yeah.
It had sawdust up to here.
Yeah.
The room.
Yeah. Okay, so if I remember correctly, you kind of stitched together some. Was it houses?
Yeah. I had this idea in my head that I could. Well, it all comes to being a penny pinch and cutting corners.
Yeah.
And I knew by then, at that point in time, that I could take a building and set it down there and get electricity brought to it and plumbing brought to it and do all the remodeling stuff inside myself without a big red tape, bureaucratic input, permits and all that. And so that's why I did it that way, and I found 3 old buildings, 2 duplexes and 1 shotgun across the field from the Pastime Lounge on Nicholson Drive, up underneath the interstate. I paid $12,000 for all 3 of them, and they moved them over there and dropped them where I wanted.
That's insane.
I went into the phone book, and looked at every restaurant in Lafayette, Baton Rouge, and called them all and said, I got a great location.
So, but you developed a fine restaurant there.
Yeah.
So I would visit you over there. My daughter's danced right around the corner, and I'd come and eat over there while I was waiting on her. But that was a great. How long did you have that?
Maybe 6 years, maybe 5 years.
6 years, and you sold out then, and so that. But Had you started investing in rental properties by that point?
Yeah, I drug Dennis and Kevin tooth and nail and bought our first house for $27,000 right behind St. Joseph Academy. And, did all the work myself and got it. I think one of them may have lived there for a while. And was getting rent for $300 a month, and the note was $100 a month, and the insurance was $50 a month, and that's was my first one. And then I bought those houses next to the restaurant and did the same kind of thing with them. But I was always intrigued with the whole concept. Real simple, you put the money down, fix it up, and somebody else pays for it for you. I love that.
Yeah.
Right? They're paying the note, they're paying all the bills.
And when it goes well, when you have a tenant that's responsible and they stay a good length of time, then it makes it a pretty sweet investment. But it's when the opposite of that happens that it gets a little tricky.
Right. The opposite of that is where the problem is, and that's what you have to be able to deal with quickly.
Or try to avoid initially, right?
One of the things I'm at 350 rental properties now, and an epiphany happened to me a while back. When you sign a year lease, which is what everyone tries to do, you're assuming that they're going to honor that contract for a year, which very few people do. And so, if someone's tearing up your property, you got to go through some pretty rigorous red tape to get them out. And in the meantime, they're destroying your property, especially if they know you're trying to get them out. And so they can do even more damage, and if they have nothing, you can't go after them. Right. So I started looking at it like, where is the rule book say that you have to sign a 12-month lease? What is the logic behind there when let's say 80% of these people don't honor the lease, they don't give you notice when they move out, they're going to do a considerable amount of damage while they're there. You're going to have to spend the money to fix it up. And by the way, I don't do any Section 8, any type of
government program.
No, because they're getting something for free, so they're not going to take care of it. When you pay for something, you take care of it, right? So anyway, I started signing month-to-month leases, and I've got probably a better. Less of a vacancy rate than anybody I know in the business.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And you know why? I do the same thing I do with the catering. I did with the catering. You give people a better product at a better price, and you take care of the maintenance. They're not going to want to go anywhere else.
So, Brian, 350 properties. What's the time span from now and when you bought that first house?
Oh, maybe 20 years, 15 years.
Yeah. So that's a nice clip. So what was the trajectory of your did it start to ramp up at some point, or was it kind of a constant increase?
Something about me is, and I mentioned this recently to somebody, you don't ever, even with my restaurants or whatever, I have to know how to do his job before I start talking on it. I need to know every part of my business. I need to know what the chef does, the bookkeeper, the bartender, the waiter. I need to know how to wait tables. I need to know all of their jobs to be the leader, right? And so I do the same thing with everything I get involved with. When I started out, I bought my first little house, a little shotgun.
Right.
I paid, and also the price you pay is monumental.
Right.
If you don't get a good price on the front end, you're losing money.
Right.
So you negotiate a good price. The art of the negotiation is a big deal in itself. So I've kind of learned how to do that. And then I bought my first two. I went in there, literally worked by myself, doing all the carpentry and cleaned them up and the plumbing and the electrical and did everything myself. Got myself a little trailer and drug it behind me. Had my dog with me. as my guard, trailer.guard, and got in there, and, you know, actually when I sold O'Brien's, I went and worked for a guy that built houses, and I watched everything he did. He paid me minimum wage, and I worked for him for about maybe 6 months, and I learned saw everything they were doing, and just, you know, like a sponge, took it all in, and then went and started, bought my first couple of houses, started trying to do what those carpenters I was watching do. Yeah. Like, you ever try to run crown molding? I was over there doing that by myself, just tearing some wood up, you know. But I learned how to do that, and so anyway, that's what I did. I started with individual houses. I got about 8 or 10 houses, and I'd buy them at dirt cheap, clean them up, paint them, get them rented out, and go back to the bank. So look what I did.
Yeah.
And I bought it for this price. It appraised twice as much. Give me the equity, and I'd buy another one.
That's fantastic. Hey, let's take a quick break there, get in a word from our sponsor, and we will be right back. We would like to thank Modus for their support of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. Who is Modus? Modus is a facility services company that works in the e-commerce fulfillment industry across the United States. What do? They like to say they take it from the conveyor to the dock door. Well, what does that mean? It means that they're building the pick stations with the cable management. They're installing guardrails and bollards. They're putting down floor marking. They're putting up aerial signage. These guys build fencing systems, shelving systems, and racking systems. They also do rack recovery for when there's rack failures. They also install dock levelers and dock doors. Modus also installs ASRS systems, which is automated storage and retrieval systems, as well as other robotics projects. They have worked for the largest e-commerce retailers in the world, and they can work for you. If you need to find Modus, you can reach them online at modusmoves.com. Okay, and we are back, Brian Brousseau. So you started to accumulate some properties, and you're starting to get in the groove here. And then at some point, I'm curious, like when you'd find this next deal, or like what it looks like when you're going, damn, I'm in it for real now. Like those milestone purchases. What did that look like for you?
When I sold O'Brien's. Well, actually, I didn't sell it. I did a lease purchase agreement with a agreed upon sales price, and they had the option to take that, exercise that price at the end of 5 years and at the end of 10 years. But it was an agreed upon price, and they went in and invested a lot of money in it.
They did.
So, and they were efficient. They ran a good business. So I knew that it was a solid deal. I wasn't taking the property back, right. And I had to do it. I didn't want to do it. My idea behind that was to get into real estate. I knew that nobody that I was aware of paid more rent than a restaurant does. And so my idea was to build that place, get it going, show that it could make money, and that's usually a 3-year deal, and then put it on the market, let someone buy the restaurant from me, and at that point, I'm a landlord.
Right.
And then go and do it again. It didn't work out that way due to marriage problems. So I ended up doing that deal with the Chimes, and I went and bought my first property, which is a complex over off of Jefferson and Bluebonnet. It's a 30-plex, and that was my first big buy. Actually, I bought it and 2 4-plexes right there, right past Bluebonnet on Jefferson. And so that was my learning field, so to speak, because I wasn't going to take out, and they were in dire straits, bad shape. Out
of the 30 units, how many were occupied?
Oh, they had drugs coming out of there, and they were in horrible condition. All the people that did do the repairs and maintenance did not know what they were doing. I mean, simple sheetrock repair looked like somebody had, thrown a bag of spaghetti on the wall. I mean, it was horrible. So, one at a time, I started by myself at the time because I wasn't going to borrow more money. They had enough there to cover paying the note. I had Pirans paying me rent for, and that turned out to be a sweet deal for me because they paid me rent for top dollar rent for 10 years while I was opening and getting into the real estate. And so I had those things going for me and some negative things going for me too at the same time. But I managed to, pinch pennies and use OPM, and I'd just do one apartment at a time and, get it rented out and go to the next one. And
so would you say that, like, you were pretty aggressive in your, expanding your properties?
Extremely.
I mean, like once you got out of Pirans, you were on.
I was on at Pirans. I was on at Decatur. I'm on about whatever.
Well, no, I'm talking specifically about the expansion of your rental properties.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm generally, and I still do it. I'm pretty much 7 days a week.
Yeah. So I mean, you're just constantly looking and expanding.
Right. And so, like I say, the art of the deal is critical. And I found that out the hard way, but, being not at the mercy of having to do something and seeing something driving down the road and calling the owner up, especially for sale by owners, and you eliminate the overhead, right? And calling them up and saying, how much you want for it, and wait a week or two and call them back, lowball them hang up on you, whatever goes, insult them, whatever.
Your secret's out.
Right. Well, and then a year later, riding by again, and it's still available, and you call them up and say, willing to. Yeah. I've done that.
Do you like me now?
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of stuff initially hands-on. Maybe you got a helper or two. But at some point, as you're growing the number of properties, you're growing your crew, you're growing your employees, right? Do you start to see like a spike in your profitability at some point? Like once you got to a certain number of properties,
of course,
you start to see improved
But there
returns.
goes my description of myself being actively involved in making myself miserable. The more money I make, the more I invest. Right. I always am up to here.
Right.
Always. And it's
like
monopoly.
If you're buying right.
Well, even if you buy wrong, what buying wrong does for you is extend the time that you're going to make a profit off of it. If you hang on to a property, you're going to make money on it someday if you, keep cleaning it up, keep it looking good, maintenance, always improve. Most of my properties, if they're so bad that they need a total redo, then I'll do a total redo. If they're half bad and I can get by with doing half, but then I'll rent it out, and if somebody moves out, I'll go in and do more and slowly upgrade them.
Have you always held your properties, or have you sold them?
Well, my nephew, he's a stock analyst, and he has changed my opinion about holding properties and leveraging. And so he's shown me some tricks, if you want to call it, or it's really logical.
Right.
Why hold on and have, $100,000 equity sitting in a property when I could sell that property, take that $100,000 and buy $1.5 million worth of something that could make me 5 times more money per month. And so I started looking at things that way, and that's how I got into, buying these bigger apartments. I mean, I'm set ready to buy big apartment complexes now, $5 to $15 million deals.
And so the biggest size unit you have now is what, like 100 and
Well,
70
no,
units?
No, the units are all 20 plexes. They're next to each other. They're called an apartment community, but they're in a neighborhood. They're really not.
I see. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but having all your property in one neighborhood or in one location is so much easier than having them all over town.
Yeah.
Those are the properties I sold off, is the ones that were out around, so I didn't have to travel to, I've got a property in Springfield, Louisiana, and it was a camp, but it's really a house. And if I have a problem with that, it's going to take me half a day to deal with that, one property. Yeah. Whereas I've got 350 in one neighborhood. Right. And, I can shuck and jive, if you want to call it.
So, Brian, what's your vision? If you look out, 4 or 5 years, what's your vision on how you see your growth continue? Are you gonna? Well, it sounds like you're not slowing down anytime soon.
And you were touching on something earlier. You don't want to get into something you don't feel like you're capable of handling. You don't bite off more than you can chew. Right. And at this point now, with 350 properties, I bought 2 last year, a 28-plex and a 24-plex, and it was the first time I bought properties that I had to evict everyone in the buildings. And so all of a sudden I don't have half of the note coming in. And then these properties are in such bad shape that I had to invest more to get them up. I mean, I'm remodeling every apartment all the way. Cabinets, they're all rotted out, and just, and when I'm finished, they look like the ones they're building over in Burbank for half the price.
Right.
And so that's putting a big damper on but I don't want to jump into anything else until I have that resolved, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through. It was 52 apartments total. And so it's been a real strain on my cash flow. But the management of more than this, or taking on more, is a real challenge. And I'm looking real hard at it. What I'm doing and what I'm dealing with is not for the faint at heart, to say the least. Yeah. The clientele is considered a rough clientele. And I know how to deal with it okay, so.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian, when I look back, and I kind of started with this, as you as a 25-year-old, probably when I first met you, you're about that age, and you were hard charging, and I was impressed, right? And here we are 40 years later, and you're still just,
having
just
a blast,
working hard and having fun doing it and doing it your way. Mm-hmm. And, to me, that's what defines a real entrepreneur, And I guess there's a lot of different types of entrepreneurs, but I always identified you as a.
I love what I do.
Yeah, and it shows. So I was curious as you look back. You've touched on a few things, but do you kind of look back on, particular things as being like this is the most important thing that I've learned in my career. This is the most important thing that happened in my career, in my life, or, what are those
memories, the painful ones,
or the ones that you learned most from, or which I guess are usually the painful ones, but
yeah. Well, I guess the main thing that I would say to your viewers is, and this has happened to me every step of the way, even my nephew, the one that knows the numbers and all that, because I am not a numbers man. I'm a nail and hammer guy. But, the numbers thing is more of a common sense thing. But, I've been told that every step of the way that you've got to have money to put down to borrow money. Got to have something to put in to borrow money. And one of the things I learned is I was under the impression that if I buy this property, invest this money, and improve that property, and increase its value, then I'll be able to take that back to the bank and use that for leverage to get the next property. Yeah. And I've been told, no, that it doesn't work that way. You still got to put cash in the game. And I've done it over and over and over. Yeah. Now, I've put a little cash into it on some, but that is not necessarily true, especially with real estate, because of what we talked about at the beginning. There's nothing more solid that banks want to use as collateral than real estate. And if they're holding the mortgage on something and you're improving it, what do they have to lose? Right. So I'm using this property over here, equity, to buy this property. Sure. And they're holding both of them. Right. And people say, no, we need you to put money into it. Well, I just found that not necessarily really true. Yeah. I've managed to acquire these properties without that being the fact. It's not true.
Yeah. Well, Brian, it has been a pleasure, man. I haven't touched base with you in a while, and I've always admired your work ethic. And
a lot of bankers, if they watch this, they're going to be mad at me for telling because people, I say go for it.
Don't worry, we're going to edit out all that part. No, I'm just kidding. So I appreciate you coming and sharing your story. I loved hearing about the stuff that I hadn't been up to date on, and it's good to know that you're still rocking and rolling and
having a blast,
working as hard as you always have. So congratulations on all your success and continued success. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. So I call myself a scrappy entrepreneur, and I use that term frequently. And I think Brian is a quintessential scrappy entrepreneur as well. He is always looking for that next deal. There's never a time where he's not looking for that next deal. That's true today, and it was true when he was 25 years old, and I got to witness that. And it was great to reconnect with Brian. Hadn't seen him in a long time, and to see that he hasn't changed a bit was really cool. When a lot of people may start to think about retiring at his age, Brian has no such thoughts. I can assure you, he is still looking at growing, and he said it several times in the show. He loves what he does, and that's clear. So we really appreciate Brian sharing his stories with us, and we appreciate you following and listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Next Entrepreneur podcast. We'd like to thank our title sponsor, Mainspring Companies. It can be reached online at mainspringcompanies.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at ask@nxtentrepreneur.com. You can subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio. You can help support our podcasts by leaving a review on Apple Music. You can follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please share this episode with your family and friends. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. They can be reached at propelyourstory.com. Today's episode was produced by Daniel Sagona.